So yes, I have shamelessly taken these slides from the wonderful Sam Chick, who I worked with, I think, well, it's almost like 2, 3 years ago now at NC's, and she made these awesome slides on teaching. Well, she titled it "Teach Me How to Google," but also it kind of covers overall debugging and how to work through problems. So this is just kind of like the catchy title, but this really kind of embodies kind of everything we want to go through today, because oftentimes we would go through some beginner bootcamp workshop of some kind, and all the examples are very nicely laid out for you, and everything works, and there's people there to help you. But when we actually get into our own code, oftentimes things get a little bit more complicated or not quite as you expected. So hopefully today, by the end of this, we'll equip you with a few more tools on kind of how to deal with issues that pop up as they arise. And if you do like this presentation, please give all your love to Sam, who so thoughtfully curated all of this before. Um, yeah, so yeah, let her know if you do really enjoy her slides, because I couldn't really do it better. So I was like, might as well just take what she had and go through the material this way. So yeah, I'll start off with talking about the slides to kind of uh, center our conversation on debugging here with some of the examples, and then I'll switch over to my Art Studio session and we can kind of go through some examples there. Perfect. So, yeah, in the beginning, I've kind of talked about this, and this really will help you hopefully figure out better strategies to Google, because sometimes, as you might have encountered before, because R is like a single lettered language, sometimes Google gives you um, variable results, and sometimes you have to like sift through a whole bunch of results before you find the one that really answers your question. So this will kind of help you figure out ways to practice and hone that skill, so that you can probably become more efficient with Google in time. But after like a lot of practice myself, sometimes for me, I just can't find the correct words as well to describe my problem. So um, it is an art, but just feel assured that even with people who um, have practiced this a lot, to get the search result that we want. Um, yeah, but oftentimes when we do encounter issues in our it's easy to kind of feel like Ron Swanson and want to just chuck your computer in the garbage. So hopefully today will make you feel less of that. So yeah, as I talked about before, um, this really is kind of roller coaster of emotions. You kind of feel the highs of like you know a lot, your R code runs really well, and then you can immediately be kind of like knocked back down when you encounter something or a cryptic or error message where you don't really know how to tackle, or you don't know where it's coming from the code. So I think Allison Horst really does a lovely job in kind of illustrating all of these situations, and really aptly kind of puts a lot of our feelings about R into picture form. So also wanted to shout her out for all of her illustration work that you might have seen around the R community. And we'll probably see more in this presentation today. Even the meetup banner is also from her. Yeah. So oftentimes when we open up Google, we often have like one of two issues. We have an error and you need help fixing it. Usually there's a nice error message that comes up in the R console that you don't really know what it is and you need to decipher. Or the second part being you know what you want to do, but you don't really know how to do it. I guess today we'll kind of focus more on the first part of things, on kind of how to fix the errors, but this will also kind of help you in figuring out kind of how to write your code to solve issues that you might not anticipate, or like guard against some of the errors that you might be getting. So you're doing less of the first part of figuring out how to fix the error. And yes, of course, sometimes both of these are happening at the same time. For this, we often will need to narrow down our scope. So first of all, a really great tool is to restart R. So oftentimes when you have a lot of things going on in your scripts, or you're rerunning things, you might have a lot of variables in your R environment, like temporary things or things that you're no longer using anymore, and just a lot of things in your R environment that might be interfering with kind of what you're actually trying to accomplish. So the best thing, as a lot of people in IT will tell you, is like, have you turned it off and on again? And in our cases is, have you restarted R? So that's restarting your R session, making sure that you're starting with a clean slate, and seeing if you can actually reproduce the bug there. And this is oftentimes the best way to kind of start off with, because that allows you to kind of rule out any other potential issues that might be confounding and like kind of confusing the waters there. So starting off with restarting R is a good place to start. And then second being checking the easy stuff. That's often things like just are you passing in the right variables into the function that you want to look at? Just even reading that R console message and seeing what it's actually telling you. Oftentimes this can be kind of like freaky to just like see it give you kind of a red message, but oftentimes it can include kind of some hint at kind of what is going wrong there. So it might be just something that you can easily quickly fix, like you just missed a comma, you forgot the brackets, or some small like syntax like error where you missed something in your R code before passing it and getting it evaluated that it's causing the error. So just checking that before you run to Google might help you already check off a lot of the scenarios that you've encountered. Yes, and then of course read the error message that I've talked about before. That kind of comes hand in hand with the easy stuff. And then double checking the documentation. That's also very important. You can pull up the help in the R console by doing like question mark your function name and checking it there, making sure that the documentation is seeing is saying kind of what you want to happen. Are you passing in the correct variables and the correct formats that they're expecting? So oftentimes you might assume that this function takes certain values, but 90% of the time that might work, but there's always the weird exceptions where, or sometimes even the function changes between versions that you need to double check that documentation that it is correct. So yeah, just a couple of pretty easy checklist things that you can start off with when something goes wrong in your R code to try first before moving on to kind of more complicated things. And then lastly, that's talking about the problem out loud. Oftentimes I find myself going through the code again, figuring out, okay, this is kind of what inputs I'm giving my function, for example, and then this is what I want out, but kind of figure, and then kind of walking myself through what's going on there, how I expect things to happen or what I expect to come out, and kind of walk through it there. Oftentimes I even find myself by the time I'm like typing up a question to a coworker, I've already resolved the problem because I finally like really formalized what the issue was and was able to like after verbalizing what the problem was, be able to even solve the issue myself before even going to Google search or even asking someone else. So this can be kind of like an underrated like skill to have, but I find it really helpful sometimes when you're stuck on something. Sometimes you can have a very narrow view on kind of what's going wrong, but once you like try to talk it out loud, like as if you were trying to explain to somebody else what is going on with the code and what you expect and how you expect it to run, that can really crystallize what might be going wrong or where the problem might be. Yes. So we've talked about the restarting R and checking the easy stuff. Oh, there's this really nice debugging bingo, which includes a lot of the easy stuff that might come up with your code. So maybe if you want to print this out and have this out for you on your desk to play bingo with yourself, just to be able to check off and getting yourself used to checking for these small things will kind of help greatly in your kind of debugging journey and in just kind of figuring out uh, the the solution to your errors a lot faster. So yeah, there's like things like missing tilde, extra comma, which I often have issues with misspelled variables. Oftentimes can be remedied with making sure you tab complete or use a lot of that convenience that's built into RStudio. Any other common ones? It'd be interesting to see what the most common issues are, but yeah, definitely when you get a lot of functions or functions within functions, extra parentheses is always my worst enemy as well. So yeah, have a look at this in detail afterwards, and hopefully that will also help with your debugging journey. And then in detail error messages. This one has an example of some data frame called Palmer penguins, and then in the data we just did head to look into that data frame. And then looking into that data frame, we can look at what species that are available. And then here, if we're filtering for a penguin species, and we provide a species that doesn't exist, for a lot of the dplyr functions, especially now, will have more detailed error messages. In this case, oh no, it's not because the species doesn't exist. It's because we put the singles equals instead of the doubles equals. Yeah, so that's kind of the nice thing about being in the tidyverse is that they have often now helpful error messages for common issues like this, but your mileage may vary depending on which packages you use. Oftentimes, most other packages don't have as detailed of error handling as tidyverse, but definitely helpful when you are within the tidyverse ecosystem. And here's like an example of that in kind of just the base R data frame. We have that error. The classic object of type closure is non-subsettable. And oftentimes it's kind of hard to figure out kind of what does this even mean? Is what does closure mean? Why is it not subsettable? So we're trying to currently subset this function that's called df, but df doesn't exist because we called our variable dat. So we're subsetting something that doesn't exist, but df also happens to be a function. So because of naming, there are some functions that can also be the same name as your variable. So sometimes you get this error message if you happen to name that function or that variable the same name as the function. So sometimes you have issues with naming in that way as well. And then for error messages, there's also some additional resources linked here that you can look at afterwards for common error messages and strategies. And then sometimes just by looking at more error messages, you'll be able to be more familiar with ones. And then if they appear again, you'll know how to tackle those error messages more quickly and efficiently by that. I feel half the time I'm able to figure out an error message quickly is because I've seen it before, or seen a variation of it at least in some capacity. So I kind of have an idea of what may have gone wrong with my code. So some of it is unfortunately having to experience the errors more. And then when you've experienced the errors more, you'll be more familiar and kind of know the strategies in how to overcome them. And then documentation, as I've mentioned before, you can either help or question mark the function name so that you can read the documentation there. And then you can kind of scan through the help documentation quickly, look for like usage or arguments or values and things like that to help you understand what that function is doing. Oftentimes, I'll just even scroll down to the examples at the very bottom to see if what I'm doing in my code matches kind of how they expect the functions to work. Because sometimes they go too much into detail in like the usage and arguments, and that doesn't really give me like the information on how that function should be used in a quick manner. So I find sometimes even going straight to the examples helps me a lot in figuring out how to use this function. Oh yes, and also this provides a good segue into vignettes. Not all packages have this, but some of them have vignettes, which is kind of longer form examples in the package on kind of how to use the functionality, and that really helps for sometimes more niche situations, like I don't know how to describe. Oh, like later we'll probably go over some of the mapping functionality that somebody asked about. That particular package actually provides some vignettes on kind of how to use it, although sometimes not always helpful, but it's at least another avenue that you can look at in understanding kind of how this function was intended to be used. And it also like kind of helps you narrow down if like, is this a new problem, or maybe it's something that they're missing on their package, and maybe it's a bug in their package that they need to fix there. Yeah. And then lastly, as we've talked about, talking about loud, here we kind of go through example of kind of rubber duck debugging, but you can really honestly use anything. It's just kind of being able to talk to something, even an inanimate object, on kind of what's going on with your code. So yeah, maybe after this, find something on your desk that you can use in this exercise, and maybe that will help you in kind of figuring out how to formulate your question, and also kind of get to the bottom of like what error exactly you're trying to solve. And then if you still haven't figured it out after kind of trying those couple of items, there's some general Googling tips here where you can add kind of R in the error message, like just paste in the error message that you have in the console, or the error message and the function or package name. Sometimes that helps kind of narrow down at least to the package, especially if you have like kind of a niche use case. That might be helpful in finding other people who might have also encountered the same problem as you, and like either like other Stack Overflow forums or in the GitHub issues for that particular package. So that's helpful. But oftentimes, I agree with the third point here that you can almost like paste the error message alone in in your Google search bar and be returned with decent results there. So no harm in just trying that in the first run before narrowing down your problem as well. And you can also, other than Google, you can, if it's a problem that's a particular package is outputting, not your own code, you can go to the source code on GitHub, or you can even on the function itself, command click the function name to look in there to see how that function is working. And you can also, as I mentioned before, look at issues or pull requests. Maybe they're already working on a fix for the problem that you have. So sometimes it's not a problem on your end. And if you've like isolated all the other potential issues that we've talked about before, the easy items, restarting R and doing all that, and you've just narrowed it down to like this particular function is not outputting kind of what you expect, might be a problem in the package itself that you're using. And this is fairly common for kind of open source packages. People are trying to kind of add functionality to it, but sometimes that breaks functionality as well, even though they do try their very best at minimizing any issues so the user experience goes well, but inevitably sometimes you use the package in a way that they don't expect, so they'll might need to make some changes to their package to make sure that they handle those situations. So sometimes I've found issues or pull requests really helpful. Oftentimes somebody else has already beaten you to it and have encountered the issue, and sometimes the authors will provide some workaround or like provide some insight onto like whether or not they'll fix it. Things like that might be helpful in figuring out what your next steps will be after you've narrowed it down to this package. If you should wait for the fix to be made, or if they're not going to fix it, and what you'll need to do to your code to kind of work around it, or things like that. Yes. And then also critical thing is to check the date of the online solution. Sometimes you find a solution, but it's not working for you quite right, but it might be 7 years out of date. Things in R can move very quickly, and things can be different depending on version. So yeah, do take a look at the date. Of course, the more recent stuff will be probably more applicable to you. But the older stuff doesn't mean that it's outdated. Might also still be useful, but also keep that in mind when you might be like copying and pasting code. from somebody else and using that in your solutions. Yeah. And then also reading multiple search results will also help. Some of them might not explain it in the way that you understand, and some others might explain it in a more detailed, better way. So yeah, definitely read multiple search results to see if you can find the one that works best for you. Isolate the relevant part of the answer. Yes, so oftentimes people will post some code or some example code with some example functionality. So this when copying pasting, just take care in kind of figuring out which part of it is the actual part that you'll need. Yes. And then this gives you some tips on how to search in Stack Overflow. I won't go into detail on this, but you can go back to the slide afterwards if you want to learn more. And then there is also, if you can't find any example of your issue anywhere, you've looked at Stack Overflow, you've looked at GitHub, you've done everything before, you can create a reprex, and that just creates a minimal reproducible sample. And I hope to, after this presentation, kind of go through how to do that there, and I'll work through one with everybody. But that just allows us to kind of create a small example that anybody can copy and paste into their R environment and create the same error that you did previously. And sometimes that even helps you solve your problem because you've stripped down the issue just to the error that we have. So oftentimes this might, even before you needed to copy and paste it to some forum like Stack Overflow, help you figure out where the issue is. But by having this, it'll make everybody in the process, the person helping you and you trying to ask the question, make the process a lot more streamlined and useful and helpful for everybody involved. So yeah, we'll come back to this afterwards, but wanted to introduce this first. And then the next part of this section, I'll just quickly go through because it's not the focus of today for debugging. I'll just go through and see if there's anything left that might be helpful that I want to go through, but this kind of just sets you up for better coding practices when you first start out, so that you run into less of the errors that we've talked about beforehand. So yeah, if you have time, you can go through the rest of this presentation as well, for also other strategies on how to kind of conceptualize your problem and start off with your codings. Building checks. Going through that. Perfect. So that kind of includes all my like talking heavy part of